Wife punished for cheating on husband by lover's vengeful wife. Our annual summer barbecue night was in full swing. There were probably over 50 people in attendance and soon to be full. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. They were swimming, playing one or more of the many lawn games available, dancing to the music on the makeshift dance floor, or crowding around the bar. The air was filled with the whirring of the margarita blender, its speed constantly changing as the bartender hopelessly tried to keep up with demand. Some were just carrying on idle conversations to chat with couples they hadn't seen in a while, sipping their favorite icy cocktails. All the little kids were in the pool. Older teens were primping each other or lounging seductively in poolside loungers. Dads were peering at teenage girls in bikinis from behind their sunglasses, thinking lewd thoughts about them. Some moms were furtively peering at the stout young men, too. It didn't bother anyone. Frankly, I think all the wives were looking forward to seeing what kind of animals their husbands would turn out to be in their beds that night, after staring at the young and mature ladies all day. Admittedly, after so many years together, they didn't care what aroused their husbands with their fatherly bodies, as long as something aroused them. Of course, all couples adhered to the look but don't touch principle when it came down to it. Apparently everyone except my wife. How did I know my loving wife was cheating on me? It all started a few weeks ago when I suspected something was wrong in my marriage. My suspicions arose from little things, but after 17 years of being together with someone, you can just sense when something is wrong. Of course, there was a really important moment that finally got me thinking. One day when I came home early in the middle of the day, I saw the two of them having sex on my bed like a couple of over-the-top adult movie stars. That's when I realized it. Audrey was cheating on me. I mentioned the little things because pointing out that I didn't understand anything made me seem like an even bigger idiot than I really was. To my credit, after seeing the main point, I realized that there are many small warning signs that I should pay attention to in the future. That is, if I ever get married again. One of the little things was that Audrey started treating me better a couple months ago. Our marriage had reached that point of intimacy where we were starting to tease each other a bit. You know, without forgetting to point out each other's little flaws. For example, I often left the toilet seat up, and every time I did that, she felt obligated to point it out to me, even if she had to wake me up or chase me while I was mowing the lawn outside. For my part, I felt it was important to point out that there were bits of gelled food left in several places on the pans she supposedly washed, even if I had to wake her up to do it. You know, these were just the cute little things that all middle-aged married people do for each other to show their love. Anyway, a couple of months ago or so, it was like someone flicked a switch and she didn't criticize me for anything anymore. I logically assumed that I was suddenly a better lover or husband, and that's what made her change. In retrospect, I realize it was pretty weird. For example, one Sunday afternoon when I woke her up to gently point out another dirty clean pan I'd picked up from the dryer, she said, "I'm sorry, Andrew. I can't believe I've been so careless. I'll try to make it up to you in the future." And she put her head back on the pillow and went back to sleep. My jaw dropped. But what I really should have noticed was that she started encouraging me to play golf with my friends all day on weekends. And on weekdays, drinking with my work buddies. I mean, really, what kind of wife does that? Anyway, after that, I couldn't be wrong anymore. Audrey wanted to have sex with me all the time. Well, about 3 or 4 times a week, instead of our usual 5-minute Saturday night sexual nirvana session. She wanted to experiment. Anyway, I was like a sex god or something. I was suddenly much better at sex, and she became very talkative. Before her change, things were different. I remember once when we were making love, I thought I heard her start to quietly say, "I think I want a baked potato for lunch tomorrow." After over a decade of marriage and 2 kids, you take what you can get. So I continued. "Sorry, I got a little off track." So what did I do about the horrific scene before me? I may be stupid, ignorant, and 15 pounds overweight, but I'm not weak. So I did what any self-respecting husband would do under similar circumstances. I sat on the floor and cried. I'm kidding. I really wasn't. I said something reasonable, considering the state of shock I was in. Are you serious? His wife is your best friend. Are you out of your mind? In retrospect, I realized that it might have been better if I had fallen to the floor and burst into tears. At least I might have earned Audrey's sympathy. I think my comment only gave her courage. Really, what kind of husband is it when he sees some asshole having sex with his wife, and his first comment is to point out that she's doing it with her best friend's husband? Thank you, Captain Hindsight. Seriously? Maybe I should have yelled, "I'm gonna kill you assholes!" and attacked them both. Or maybe something else masculine, but again, in my defense, I was shocked by what I witnessed. Neither of them uttered a word or made the slightest attempt to cover themselves. For a few seconds, they both stared at me dumbly. Perhaps they, too, were having trouble realizing the absurdity of what I had just said. Finally, completely at ease, they both slid off the bed and began to dress quietly. They were not at all embarrassed by their nakedness. Audrey was the first to speak. Jake, darling, I think it's time for you to leave. Andrew and I need to have a little talk. Everything that asshole said was, okay. He finished getting dressed and walked past me without even saying hello. He walked carelessly towards the exit of my house as if he had no problems in this world. I wanted to say something threatening and clever to him, but considering my failure a few minutes ago, I wisely decided not to. Audrey began to speak to me patronizingly, like a small child. I'm sorry you saw that, honey. It doesn't mean anything. It just distracts me a little. It doesn't affect my love for you in any way. It'll pass quickly. Blah, 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 blah. All this time she was dressing very casually. I couldn't tell if she was taking her time to make sure I discerned the pinkish-red bite marks all over her breasts, or if she just didn't notice they existed. Audrey continued to speak to me slowly and soothingly, pulling the sheets off what used to be our bed. She started putting them in the laundry basket as if it was her regular laundry day. Come to think of it, yes, it was her regular laundry day. Interesting. I could only stand there with my mouth wide open and my eyes blinking like a stoplight. When Audrey finished putting the dirty linens in the hamper, she picked it up and leisurely walked past me into the laundry room. Come with me, dear. So, we can continue discussing our little problem. And, strangely enough, I followed her like a little lost puppy. She started listing all the technical reasons why divorce could be bad for the whole family, but especially for me. Oddly enough, there was nothing threatening or demanding in Audrey's demeanor. She was businesslike in pointing out the practical implications of divorce for family members. Prudence on my part would certainly go a long way toward avoiding any trouble. I think that's what she meant. Audrey began loading the linens into the washing machine. She added the tablets and liquids, adjusted the settings, and started the wash cycle. Here we go. She turned to me and quickly ran her hands back and forth as if wiping them clean. It's all good now. I'm so glad we understand each other. With a gentle pat on my shoulder, she walked away. Oh, I have to go pick up the kids, was her parting comment. I stood there like a statue for almost 10 minutes, maybe an hour. I had no idea. I had heard that when a man is in shock, he does what he knows. He is like a robotic vacuum cleaner with a set program and will do his normal job. That's exactly what I did for the next 2 weeks. Oh, I told myself I wasn't going to put up with her antics. I lay awake at night thinking of all the ways I could kill her and her lover without going to jail. I began to devise very cunning surveillance plans to gather more evidence of the treacherous affair. Then I asked myself, what more evidence do I need? So, I focused my efforts on devising detailed and elaborate plans to save up money and disappear to a tropical paradise surrounded by sexy natives fulfilling all my needs and fantasies. But what I actually did was nothing. Well, almost nothing. I made sure I never came home early from work again. When it was time to go to work, I went. When it was time for dinner, I ate it. Every Saturday morning, I mowed the lawn as usual. When it was time to go to bed, I went to bed. Yes, in my bed next to my wife. Of course, I vowed never to have sex with that cheating bitch again. That promise, made to myself, lasted 3 whole nights. Now comes the strangest part. My wife never said another word about her roommate, Jake. It was as if that terrible day had been a mirage. Our lovemaking went from 3 or 4 times a week to 5 or 6. They became more athletic and varied. Her lunches became more exotic and delicious. She treated me with more respect than she ever had in our marriage. Audrey had always been a good mom, but she turned into a super mom. She became a real Stepford wife. Oh, I'm sure she was still cheating on me with Big Jake, as she called him that fateful day. I just never saw any evidence or even a hint of it. I was slowly getting used to her other life, which I'm sure was her strategy. My life, on the other hand, has never been better. I have to admit I had pretty much put cheating out of my mind, happily hiding my head in the sand, so to speak, at least until the kids turned 18. And then this fool took over and destroyed my dilapidated house of cards and my fictional fantasy world. She invited her lover to our annual barbecue. My annual barbecue! And that brings us to today. I still can't believe my wife had the nerve to invite her lover, his wife, and kids to our annual summer barbecue. But I finally had a real plan. It took money and time, but I was ready for the day of revenge. I could see that Audrey was getting nervous, too. She rightly suspected I was up to something because she kept watching me. I'm sure she was worried. Her lover was half an hour late. Finally, the doorbell rang. I sprinted to the door ahead of Audrey by a moment. Sure enough, there stood the asshole with a smirk on his face that was unmistakable. Before I could say a word, their kids, Jess and Jessic, who were already in their swim trunks, flew past us. They shouted that they were going to join our kids, Katie and Caleb, in the pool, waved to my wife and I as a greeting, and ran off. While I stood there looking at Jake's sanctimonious grin, Audrey and Eddie kissed each other on both cheeks. "Oh, Audrey, thank you so much for inviting us. We just love your parties." I wondered for a moment why that asshole would cheat with my wife when he was married to this cold-blooded vixen. After a couple of drinks, my wife was a hair away from scoring a 7 on the 10-point scale, but Addie was as close to a 10 as is even possible for any twice-experienced mother. I hugged her tightly. I must have held Addie too tightly and for too long, because when I finally let her go, she threw me a surprised and perplexed look. The asshole silently held out his hand. He could barely contain his glee at the embarrassment and humiliation he was causing me. We stood in the hallway, and I reached into my pants pocket and pulled out a flash drive and some quarters. I handed Eddie the flash drive, then swiped the quarters in the palm of my hand. "Thanks, Andrew, but what are these?" Addie said curiously. "It's an explanation of what I'm about to do." I gritted my teeth tightly because I knew it was going to hurt. I pulled back, and with all the energy I could muster, I punched Jake right in his arrogant nose with my $10 fist. I had to do it because Jake was younger, stronger, taller, fitter, and weighed 30 pounds more than me. Aren't wives' lovers always like that? What would be the point if they weren't? I mean, why would a woman choose a lover who was as old, soft, and pathetic as her husband? Anyway, I wanted to make sure he fell. And he did fall. Blood and snot and gristles spurted from Jake's nose. And quarters. The quarters went flying in all directions. They made a horrible noise, too, scattering and bouncing on the tiled floor. A searing pain shot through my entire shoulder, but I'd never felt so good in my life. The humiliation of the past few weeks went away in an instant. I could feel the adrenaline running through my veins. I think I must have been experiencing that survivor's high that soldiers talked about after a battle because they were lucky enough to survive it. I have no doubt that in a fair fight, Jake probably would have killed me. But the asshole who cheated with my wife doesn't deserve a fair fight. He deserved what he got and more. Hopefully that and more would be that his wife would divorce him. She and her kids deserved better. Come to think of it, so did I, and my kids deserved better. Time seemed to drag on as if in slow motion. Addie screamed inconsolably but froze in place, her beautiful dark brown eyes as big as saucers. Audrey fell to her knees, trying to comfort her semi-conscious lover, and I noticed that a crowd had begun to gather. Word must have spread quickly because our living room was quickly filling up with partygoers. Some of them were dripping water on Audrey's new Berber rug because they had just jumped out of the pool to see what all the fuss was about. "Andrew!" shouted Addie, staring at me incredulously. "Are you out of your mind? Why on earth would you do that?" She pointed at her squealing pig husband, who was lying on the floor next to her, trying to figure out what had happened. "Because, Eddie, your hubby has been having sex with my wife for over 6 weeks now." There was a loud bang, and the Italian tile floor shook slightly as my wife landed on it and passed out. Ouch! That should have left a mark. Even though Addie was shocked, steam started to roll out of her ears. I found it interesting that she didn't question the veracity of what I had just told her. I'll have to ask her about that someday. It's all on a flash drive. There are pictures, video, and audio. I pointed to the little green plastic stick she was clutching in her hand. It was a good thing we had a big living room because everyone but the little kids crowded in there to watch the show. Little kids pay almost no attention to anything but what's going on in their own world, so they just kept swimming and grabbing at their bodies. Both Jake and Audrey started to come around. I was starting to get a little worried because it looked like the bleeding from his nose hadn't slowed down at all. Maybe it was just because the blood had spread thinly on the hard floor, but it still seemed like a lot of blood to me. My wife was sobbing. "How could you do this to me? I told you that it was nothing, that it would be over soon and no one would even know about it." "Because, dear wife, I just wanted you to feel a fraction of the humiliation I was feeling. And as for no one finding out?" I turned to our stunned and whispering audience and raised my hands to reassure those gathered. "I do apologize for the commotion, guys." I pointed to the blood-soaked floor where Jake and Audrey lay. "There's no cause for concern. I'd like everyone to go back outside and enjoy the party, but first I have a question for you." I noticed that Audrey was frozen again with a dropped jaw. How many of you here knew, or at least suspected to the point where it became a topic of conversation, that my wife and Big Jake were having an affair? Several hands began to slowly rise as the suddenly shy party members furtively glanced at each other. It's safe in large company, so more and more hands went up as the guests got used to the circumstances. "I see. It seems that more than half of you were aware to some degree. Thank you for your help, and now please, let's get back to the party. This will be our last party, so I really want you all to have a good time. The food will be ready soon." It was at this point that Addie punched a shocked Audrey right in the nose, with almost the same result as my punch at Jake. The rest of the audience cheered and gasped as Audrey collapsed to the floor a second time, though she was now in a sitting position. With her head thrown back, Audrey clutched her nose, desperately trying to stop the blood from flowing out of it, and continued to wail. Addie leaned over, trying to help her husband, who was in bad shape, to his feet. She spoke with a restrained fury that was unnerving. "Listen to me, Jake. Pick your body up off the floor and take yourself to the emergency room. After that, I don't care where you go as long as you don't go home. The kids and I are going to stay and enjoy the rest of the party. Besides, when my ex-best friend stops crying and bleeding, we'll have a little talk with her." "But I need to see a doctor. You broke my nose." "Nobody cares, Audrey. As big as your nose is, I probably made it look better on your fat face. Now come with me. We can talk in private." She grabbed my wife by the hair and literally dragged her like a caveman across the floor to the back of the house. Audrey was thrashing, screaming, and crying the whole way. I'm sure it took a lot of strength for Eddie to do that, but honestly, the floor was pretty slippery from blood and other junk. I even chuckled a little when I saw a couple quarters stuck to Audrey's face as she was dragged past. I know. I'm a terrible person. Okay. Eddie's last sarcastic remark about Audrey's face was probably unfair. My wife's nose was a little prominent, but her face wasn't fat. I liked her nose. It looked like Jennifer Grey's beak. I had always been partial to the little girl. However, I was sure that after the blow she received, Audrey's taste would change forever, too. It's a shame, very sad. That's her problem. Besides, judging by the look on Eddie's face, Audrey might suffer even more for the rest of the evening. I've always liked Addie, but here my admiration for her was off the charts. Unlike me, when faced with a shocking situation, she acted like a real boss. Her quick, decisive actions and statements seemed to impress everyone. So the crowd began to disperse into the backyard. I could even hear old Mrs. Johnson saying to her husband as she led him back outside, "I told you this was going to be a great party, Jack. Come on, let's go look for margaritas." I was torn. Honestly, I was a little worried about Audrey's safety in Eddie's clutches, but someone had to grill. People were getting hungry. I decided the grill was my priority. I kept sneaking glances toward the house, but since there were no sounds of crashing furniture, dishes, or screams of pain coming from inside, I continued my grilling duties. Not to brag, but people always tell me I make the best burgers in town. The main thing is that you must use real wood or briquettes, but never gas. Only people with double incomes and no kids use gas. This is because if you use gas, a real child will not eat anything cooked on it. Anyway, my other secret ingredient was marijuana. Okay, I'm just kidding about that. It's actually a special blend of various spices, 3 kinds of grated cheese, and Worcestershire sauce. The meat, of course, must be fresh, not frozen. The top of the sirloin should be chopped into 80 to 100-gram pieces. Usually, all the guys would come up to me when I was working on the grill. They were always trying to get me to tell them about my secret ingredient recipe. I never told them about it because then it wouldn't be secret ingredients, would it? But today, none of the guys came up to me. Not one of them, not even to just chat. It made me wonder, why did that happen? Oh, well, it doesn't matter now. I've already had my kids' DNA tested, so who cares? However, most of their wives came up to me at some point and expressed sympathy for my problems. They asked if there was anything they could do to help and showed some sort of concern, just like moms do. I think it's genetic. 2 of them made sure I had their cell phone numbers just in case. At one point, Addie, leading Jess and Jessica behind her, strode purposefully toward me. To be honest, I was a little scared. I mean, after the right punch she'd hit Audrey with, and the fact that even though I was only a mediator, I'd seriously messed up her world. So I took a couple steps back just in case. I had nothing to worry about. She wrapped her arms around me and hugged me tightly. If I wasn't a man, I would have thought a hug was a little off the barbecue. She squeezed me so tightly that I could feel her breasts on my chest. When she finally let go of me, she said with disgust, "I'm sorry we have to make an emergency run, Andrew, but it seems my idiot husband can't even get to the hospital without my help." She shook her head dismissively. He'd better get used to doing everything himself. It was at that moment that I remembered Audrey. I looked over Eddie's shoulder at the house. You didn't kill her, did you, Eddie?" I heard her children giggle softly in response to that question. I looked down at them. They each had a freshly washed coin in their hand. "No, Andrew, I didn't even touch her anymore. I just explained to her how things were going in life and what I was going to do next." "Oh, okay." I was definitely curious as to what "what's next" meant, but I decided to just leave it at that. The 3 of them ran out of the yard to meet their driver. I wondered what Addie had said to my ex-wife. I'll have to ask her that someday. About 20 minutes later, I was finishing cleaning the trash off the grates and saw my wife timidly approaching me. She didn't seem to have any new physical injuries, but she did look a little like a raccoon with 2 black eyes. I figured it would definitely get worse over the next few days. Her nose had already swollen to twice its normal size. The blood-soaked pieces of toilet paper sticking out of each nostril, coupled with the makeup dripping down her cheeks, didn't make her look any better either. "I've never been so humiliated in my life," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, honey, but in my defense, it won't last. If I'd known it was upsetting you so much, I would have stopped. How could you embarrass me like that?" I started to get indignant, but she continued. "I mean, This day couldn't have been any worse, she whimpered, looking around and seeing that everyone was looking in our direction. They were probably hoping for more fireworks. They probably were! I deliberately interrupted her, continuing to scrub the grill furiously. Are you Audrey Smith? Asked an angelic-looking young lady in her 20s who stealthily approached us. Yes. You've been served. And she handed Audrey the ubiquitous 8.5 by 11-inch envelope of heavy manila paper. There was another thud, and Audrey hit the ground again. Fortunately, this time, she fell to the grass. I'm pretty sure I heard someone exclaim, "One more? 3 more? Thanks for the burgers, Mr. Smith." And a pretty chubby girl happily scurried out the gate. I felt like the king of the world, standing there with a Brookstone spatula in my hand, chef's hat pulled up at just the right angle, and a grease-stained Los Angeles Dodgers grill coat. I proudly stuck out my chest, majestically surveying my kingdom. A real man. Yes, the end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you!